Welcome to lesson 19 of Learning New Testament Greek. Today we conclude the prologue to John's Gospel with verse 18. John chapter 1, verse 18. Theon udes heoraken popote, monogenes theos, hoon es ton kolpon tu patros, ekenos exegesato. John 1:18. Theon udes heoraken popote, monogenes theos, hoon es ton kolpon tu patros, ekenos exegesato. So here we have the letter by letter. Theon udes heoraken popote, monogenes theos, hoon es ton kolpon tu patros, ekenos exegesato. Now our word by word translation. God, and the in ending indicates that's the object. No one has seen ever. So the subject is no one, the object is God, and the verb is seen. Udes, notice the u part meaning not, so udes means no one, not anyone. Has seen, heoraken. You may be familiar with the word eureka. That's what Archimedes said when he discovered the solution to the problem that was vexing him. Eureka meaning I have seen it. So this is heoraken. So the ending is the third person singular. Heoraken. He, she has seen. Heoraken, and it is a perfect. It doesn't have the repeated letter, which I said was characteristic of it, but in this case it just takes the hair. But the K here is also characteristic of the perfect. And the en means the third person singular. So that's why I've translated has seen. Now, popote means at any time, ever. Monogenes theos, hoon. So on is actually a participle. It means being, or in this case simply is. Es ton kolpon. So kolpon is, in the traditional versions it's translated bosom. A modern English equivalent would be lap. In the lap of the Father, that one, exegesator, explained him. So this is the word from which we get exegesis, which means discerning and setting out the meaning of the Bible, exegesis. So here is the verb used in the sense of explaining or letting people know. So where do we go? Back to kolpon for a minute. The root form is kolpos, as I said, bosom or lap, indicating intimate fellowship. So the NIV 2011 says in closest relationship with the Father. We find the same idiom used in John 13:23, where the disciple who Jesus loved was reclining eis in to kolpo tu Jesu, in the lap of Jesus, or in closest fellowship with him. A little bit more about this one. The word is used in Greek religion, publishing or explaining divine secrets. The noun, exegesis, doesn't occur in the New Testament, but we see it in the writings of the Church Father Clement. We said there is no expressing or telling the perfection of love. There is no exegesis of the perfection of love, meaning telling it out, explaining it, expressing or telling. Monogenes, see verse 14, mono as in monopoly. So the traditional translation of this and the King James Version and other traditional versions is only begotten. So to beget, in modern English terms we would say father. So the only begotten would be the only fathered. But in the old genealogies, as we read in the King James Bible, David begat Solomon and Solomon begat. So we would translate that in modern English idiom, David fathered Solomon. But here we have, just a point on that first, a certain large Christian group that places Bibles in hotel rooms refuses to use the NIV because they don't use the expression only begotten. It's a great pity that they can't see that the NIV translators have done a good job of getting the meaning of monogenes in plain modern English when they wrote in the NIV 2011, the one and only Son. Of course, every translation loses something, but it seems to me that's the best way of getting it in plain modern English. If you want to use a more technical, obscure term, you can say only begotten. Well, that's accurate on paper, but who among modern people, even I would suggest who among many people who are familiar with the old versions really know what these words mean? They might be familiar to some of us as biblical idiom, but what do they really mean? We don't really know what anything really means until we put it into plain modern English. And so that's what I have here, God the one and only Son. Understanding something and getting it in your plain, normal, everyday dialect is one and the same thing. If you understand it, you can put it in your own simple language. If you hear it in your own simple language, then you understand it. That's why it's important to express it in simple, plain, well understood English, and then everybody knows exactly what it means. But this is probably not the only way to do it. You can perhaps think of other ways or check in other versions, but that's what I've put. And I've followed them here to the Son who lives in the closest relationship with the Father. He has told us all about him. I've added the all to just to make the meaning clear. Told us all about him. Now there is an issue here in the text. This monogenos theos. Now this is about as direct a statement as you could like for the divinity of Christ, because it's talking about Jesus Christ, and here it calls him the monogenes theos, the only born God. But again, notice it doesn't say ha theos, so it's not so clearly and definitely referring to God, the person God, as it would be with the article. Nevertheless, I think it is referring to Jesus, certainly as, we could say, the deity. The deity, that's the word that I used when trying to explain John chapter 1, verse 1, and the difference between deity and the deity, which I talked about there. Perhaps it's worth just looking at that again. En arche en hologos, kai hologos en pros ton theon. So the ton theon is definitely talking about God as the individual, but here there is no article, no the. So when there is no the, it tends more to be talking about the quality of divinity rather than God as the individual. So it's probably more saying here the Logos was divine, and I tried to bring out the difference by using the English word deity, and with the word deity, which actually just comes from Latin, we can use the word the in a similar way. And the word was with the deity, and the word was deity. So you can see there that it kind of shades over into the meaning of deity, meaning divine quality. The Logos had divine quality. But here it does, maybe those things are attached to it. We can't take grammar rules as definite, never to be changed, immutable laws, but they can indicate things, which is what I tried to show by using the word deity there in that example. The only begotten, the one and only born. So this is definitely saying born. This part means born, and mono is only. So the only born God. Now this does seem to raise a difficulty which was obviously felt early on by scribes and copyists, because if we take the note number 5 from verse 18, we come down here, verse 18, number 5, and monogenes theos, which is the text that we have here, and this text is found in this fancy P here, means the papyrus 66, and these are other versions, and then church fathers. Well, the asterisk means what seems to be the original copy, but there are other copies of it that seem to say something different. They don't have them listed here, but okay, so the first alternative they give after these parallel lines is ho monogenes theos, with the, and that's P75, papyrus number 75, and this is Sinaiticus manuscript 2, the second copy of it. But here's the important variation down here, homogenes huios. So it's replaced theos by huios, which means son, and that's supported by these manuscripts here. So the scholars who sift through all these old manuscripts and try their best to determine what it was that John himself originally wrote, separate that from what some later scribes might have changed it to, have decided that the only begotten, the one and only Son found in these manuscripts, they have decided that probably, so this is a B rating, so that means like say 70 or 80% probability that John himself wrote monogenes theos, and that this monogenes huios was introduced by some scribes or copyists who wrote these manuscripts. Often this will happen by one scribe might think that's a strange reading, how can that be true? And so they might write huios up in the margin over here, and then 100 years after that another copyist comes and thinks, oh, that's what it's supposed to be, so he takes it from the margin and he puts it into the text. So that could be an explanation of how this got into the text. An important principle that they follow when trying to determine the text is the most difficult reading. So they say they've decided that this is the more difficult reading, and so it's likely that a scribe will change a difficult reading into an easier reading, rather than that a scribe would change an easier reading into a difficult reading. They think it's more likely that we can explain the existence of these two readings by the fact that this is the more difficult one. A scribe tried to explain it, and so he wrote that. And so the more difficult reading is the original. But again, we don't have 100% certainty, just maybe 70 or 80% certain. But this is thought to be the more difficult reading because it just sounds a little difficult. The only born God sounds a little bit more difficult and likely to have been changed, rather than this, the original reading. What scribe would change it to that doesn't seem quite so likely. Again, not 100% certain. So we can certainly say that in the text we have here a pretty strong assertion of the divinity of Christ, even though he was born, unlike the Father. The Father was never born. The Father was unborn, but the Son was born, but the only born, and he shares divinity with the Father. The early Catholic theologians said the Son was fathered but outside time, in eternity, outside time. So there never was a time when Christ was not, because he was fathered outside time, before time began. And he is the only born, the one and only Son of God and divine. And he lives in the closest fellowship with the Father. So he's the one who explained God to us. So again, quite a remarkable truth that this is making. First of all, asserting the divinity of Christ, and then his closest fellowship with the Father, and then saying he's the one who has explained God to us. Again, quite a startling, really, and remarkable and very amazing and a wonderful truth that God has been explained to us by Jesus.